Hey, what's going on? Dr. Nigel Glasscock here, talking why bands break up. So, brief history of my career, and we've talked on other shows on Ryan. I want to thank Ryan for letting me use his studio. He's my cousin, and he lets me come on his show as a guest. We talked hair metal before. We've talked Guns N' Roses. So I was a rock god, really, in the late 70s and early 80s on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. You know, we played Long Beach Arena. We played and opened up for Motley Crue in 83. We did the Monsters of Rock. It was like kind of a side thing in the parking lot, but it was the Monsters of Rock tour. After I got done, after grunge killed my career, I got into medicine. And I became a therapist, psychiatrist for rock bands. And today we are going to talk, by the way, before I give you the prescription, we need some subscriptions today. So let's sign up to this channel. We are going to talk why do rock bands break up and creative differences and what one can do. What I tell my clients, and Ryan's one of my clients. I am going to share, he doesn't know I'm actually here today. I am going to share some of his sessions. Not because I should, because it's really against client privileges, but because I think he needs to maybe hear some things. Not just what he said, but some of my analysis. Anyway, why be in a rock band? Why be in a band? Whether it's a jazz quartet or a rock band or a folk band, why are we doing this? Right? Well, it's always more fun to play with somebody else than to play with yourself. It just is. You can sit there on the edge of your bed and play guitar and sing, but when you get a drummer, I remember when I first got my first drummer back in the 70s, Jonesy, man, it changed everything for me. Just changed the way that my guitar sounded. All of a sudden, I became better. I felt like I became better. It sounded like a band. So obviously playing with people is better, right? What kind of band do you want to have? Is there a direction? Is everybody on the same page musically? Do you got one guy that likes progressive rock and another guy that likes, Duran Duran? Another guy that likes Ted Nugent? I mean, what is the chemistry? Those are things that need to be figured out. You also have to be realistic on what you're capable of doing. You got 5 guys, whether they be teenagers or grown men, trying to start a band. You're not going to play Van Halen's first album in its entirety. You might have to play some CCR or some more meat and potatoes music, just because it's easier to get your sound that way and hone your craft and work up to the more sophisticated rock. It's and you want to be friends, right? So what is ideal for your, every Saturday, let's equate it to playing golf. And I do this with some of my clients. Are you gonna, who do you want to play golf with on Saturday or Sunday? A bunch of guys that you hate, or a bunch of guys that you love and you can crack jokes with and have fun with. And sometimes it has to be a mixture. You got to find a bass player, or you got to find a drummer. Your drummer quit. Now you need a new guy. Not everybody can. You can't turn everybody into a drummer or a bass player. So sometimes you have to get on the internet and find somebody, or somebody's cousin or whatever. It has to be fun though. We have to keep things light. And that's where some of the songs. Let's say you start writing songs. You're playing cover songs. Hopefully your band's enough of the guys are on the same page musically that you're kind of at least playing the same genre. And liking it. Then maybe somebody starts writing. That guy does want his songs at some point to kind of be played just to make them real. That can be tough on bands. Especially for the guys that don't write or have no intentions of writing. Maybe they don't like your music. Maybe they'll kind of halfway go through the motions when they're playing your music. They'll give everything when you're playing Led Zeppelin. They'll do everything when you're doing a Journey cover. But then you play this guy over here's new song, bass player A, and you just kind of mail it in, and you don't try hard. You got a bad attitude, and you don't give him everything you have when he's poured his heart out trying to, make this song good. Songwriting can come in and creep in a band, a cover band, and ruin it, especially if you take that too seriously. Practicing, band practice. How often should a band practice? Probably at least once a week, right? A lot of bands can't do that. Ryan's told me that his bands can't practice once a week. And sometimes it's tough to practice twice a month. And some people come to the practices and they haven't practiced at all since the last practice 2 weeks ago. And they use the jam or rehearsal as practice time. Whereas one guy knows everything, knows all the solos, knows all the lyrics, and the drummer knows this, or the bass player knows everything, and the guitar player shows up and doesn't know. But you're friends, and it's hard to ride that guy too hard because he's got stuff going on in his life, and what are you going to do? Fire him? I don't know. So practicing, pulling your own weight. Again, it's a team sport. Everybody has to play well for everything to sound better. One guy can't be, so much better or so much worse because, everybody has to be a cog in the wheel to make it run properly. So you got to practice, and there's a responsibility to your bandmates to keep up, to know the music, to actually work at it sometimes. Then there's the guy that doesn't know what he doesn't know. He doesn't know that he doesn't know the music. He thinks everything's easy and that he can just play anything because he's a good musician and he doesn't have to practice. But he doesn't realize that he's not playing it right to begin with. And you can't tell him anything because he knows everything. And that leads me to know-it-all guy. And Ryan's talked to me about, and I've diagnosed Ryan with LSD. It's lead singer's disease. It's very, very prevalent in the music industry. What is LSD? Lead singer's disease is the front man of the band thinks he has an enormous ego. And because he's singing the songs, more than likely he's picked a lot of the songs. And because he's picked the songs and sings the songs, he knows them pretty well. And he has an attitude and an ego that is difficult to be around. This guy's a jerk. Sometimes he treats his bandmates like, poorly because he's so high and mighty on his own thing. You can sniff that guy from a mile away, and it's sad, and you can overcome it. Well, I've talked to him about overcoming that. He's working on that. He's working on being smarter about the stuff that he does. And that also leads me into egos. Everybody has an ego. So you can have lead singer disease. You can have cool drummer disease where the guy doesn't, nothing bothers him. Hey, I'm going to show up with my sticks. I'm all good, man. But even the guy that thinks he doesn't have an ego, the quietest guy in your band has an ego. Sometimes he suppresses that ego and then ends up blowing up. Sometimes he, just, again, keeps things pent up, but then ultimately has to, prove who he is in the band. Everybody's got an ego, whether you think they do or not. And you should have an ego. It takes an ego to be a good performer, right? You're going into the club. You're playing a huge party for 1,000 people. You better have some swagger and you better have some ego and attitude. Doesn't mean you have to be an asshole, but you better have something that you're bringing to the table. Everyone. And then there's Mr. Know-It-All musician guy that's been around the block forever. The experienced rock star guy that's in a band with newer musicians. And he tells you, well, we did it like this back in '89 when I was in a, Metallica cover band, and we would do this, and we would travel, and I know this, and you're not playing that solo right, and I've got so much experience that this new thing that we're going to play in front of 13 people, So now he's gone from the big stages and the rock clubs, he's playing, 17 people parties. But he's acting like he's a rock star still. That guy needs to check himself too. Just because you might be the best guy in your band, you're musically better than everybody else. And that happens a lot. A lot of times you can ride a guy's guitar playing skills, or a great drummer or bass player, or even a great singer. Ride that one guy's talent, and everybody can kind of slightly pick up the pieces and be good enough to play. Even get good enough to get paid. But that guy's got to be smart about how he treats other people, right? So, show off players. Same thing, show off players. Get on stage and your guitar solo is long and self-indulgent. Or as a singer, you're screeching and trying to hit notes that you really can't do. Or you haven't warmed up properly to hit those notes. Get lost in the weeds in a guitar solo that could have ended a minute and a half ago, but you keep going because you don't know how to stop. And you have to keep going because you don't see an ending to it. God, it's painful. Alcohol and drugs. Man. Smoking a little weed when you're playing, it's great. You play better, actually, I think. But then you drink. Maybe you're drinking, too. Drinking makes you just not care. After a certain point, you don't know what sounds good anymore. You're having a good time. But it clouds your reality more than marijuana does on what sounds good and what doesn't sound good. And then sometimes people mix the two, and sometimes people do more than that. But, drinking too much. Knowing when you can have a fun rehearsal and overdo it, and everybody's having a blast and it's fun. But you got a gig coming up in 2 weeks, and you haven't practiced enough. That guy can't show up drunk. Get to the practice at 4, and the guy's got a buzz on already, and you're supposed to play for 4 hours that night. And he's going to continue to drink all night and turn into an asshole. You got to know when it's time to have fun and party a little bit, because this is fun, right? Again, the golf analogy. You want to go out and have fun. You want to have some drinks. You want to have fun. But you got to know when it's time to turn the business side of it and the practice side of it on, and when the party side of it's over. And that does lead to making it a business. There's nothing worse than your golf group all of a sudden thinking you're in a business. Now, golf isn't a good analogy, but the music part is, because you can make some money and you can have gigs and you have to get in front of people. And all of a sudden, every time you practice, it's about practicing for that next gig. And if you're a band like Ryan's band, they change the set list up every time. So you're always practicing new songs. So you're always having to learn stuff. And if it becomes so much about that the fun part goes out the window, then you're going to start fighting. You're going to start fighting big time. Because not everybody wants to be, on stage, or cares about the bar, or cares about the $50 that you make, or whatever you end up making. It's not a lot usually, especially in the bar, in the clubs. Got to know what's going on. Being late goes with not knowing the music. Practice is at 8. You show up at 8:45. Leaving early. Hey, get up to 8. At 9:15, he's like, I got one more song in me. Well, guys, you got to practice. You got to practice enough to be as good as you can be, so that when you hit the stage, you're good. You're great. You're great. The Yoko Ono effect. Go to a guy's house and maybe his wife's watching the whole time. It can be cool. Sometimes she lends her advice. Sometimes the kids lend their advice, or the kids are running around jacking around. You're playing twice a month. You can't carve out a little bit of time just to have the band get their stuff done and work, and not have all kinds of people hanging around watching. And those can be fun practices too when it's a party environment too. But sometimes some of the people can be a distraction. It can be a distraction. You got work to do on occasion. Gigs, mistakes. There's going to be mistakes at gigs. There might be a mistake 30 seconds into the first song that you're going to have to deal with. It could be a technical issue. You could kick a patch cord out and have a foghorn go off in your amplifier, which I know Ryan's talked about. You could have a malfunction of a piece of equipment like a fog machine to where that goes off and you can't see your hand in front of your face because there's so much fog and dry ice. That's happened to Lords of Insanity. You can have a guy wasted on stage and people are giving him drinks and putting adult cigarettes in his mouth while he's playing and he's having a hard time performing. But if you have a mistake, you got to deal with it, and you can't focus on it and let it screw up your night, because it will if it gets in your head. You know, you lose your confidence on stage. You either deal with it and laugh about it and make that same mistake twice just so they know that you did it on purpose, or you forget words on stage. Got to make them up, man. I've gotten through full songs back in the late 70s and 80s when I was rocking houses where I just said nonsense lyrics the whole time. Or you get up there and you forget a chord progression and you know you're screwed and you're looking at the other guitar player trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. And you can't get it in your head. You just have a mental block in front of, a stadium crowd. There's no scarier feeling than that. Setting up and tearing down. Set your equipment up, and then if somebody else needs help, set their equipment up. Help them at the end of the show. Help everybody till the last piece of equipment is put away. These are all things that can piss somebody off. You got a small rig, you put it away and you go to the bar and you start hammering drinks while your bandmates are lifting amps and taking PAs out and doing. Help till the last thing is picked up. Bring your own equipment. Don't rely on somebody to bring your equipment for you. If there's any question about equipment, getting to the gig, should I bring this too? Make a phone call. No texts, no emails, nothing that can be lost in translation. Get your shit and bring it. Attitude problem guy. Attitude, everything sucks. I don't want to play this night. Or it's too late. The music's lame. You don't want to play with a guy that does that consistently. Everybody can have a bad day. Everybody can have a bad night. You could be going through some problems, and it makes having fun harder. But if you got a guy that's consistently a buzzkill, it's got to be. You can't deal with that because it's going to screw everything up and make everybody else not have fun. Once you're not having fun, it's over. You might as well be, waiting at the DMV for license plates. I mean, you can't deal with it. This is supposed to be fun. This is why we do this. Being a band leader. Whew. Ryan's talked to me about being a band leader and what he's realized and learned over the last 10 or 11 years is there's a responsibility of many things. Setting an example, not being, drunk at a practice, not being a jerk, not telling somebody when they have a musical idea that they have a bad idea or that we shouldn't do that. You can listen and you can diplomatically, say, hey, maybe that's not what we should do. Showing up to practice fully in knowledge of the material. Setting an example at a musical level that when everybody gets there, they know that you know your parts and you're organizing practices. You're setting up gigs. You're doing the marketing. You can't have 4 leaders in a band. And I've talked to people and artists. I used to have David Lee Roth as a client back in the early 2000s, and he struggled with that. You can't have 4 leaders. Everybody has to be respected. Everybody's ideas have to count. But if you have 4 different visions, that can be hard too. You almost have to trust in one vision. And if there's a person spearheading that, the person spearheading that needs to have his stuff together. He needs to be respectful of his bandmates. He needs to be respectful of everybody's time, because everybody's taking time out of their lives, especially when you're a weekend warrior band. And you need to do your job as good as you can. You're only a human being. But there's a lot of responsibility in that. And sometimes band leaders don't want to be that. They want to go be a side man in the band because they don't want to deal with everything. Having the brains to take that role on properly. Delegating leadership, delegating roles. Hey, as a leader of a band, hey, guitar player, I need you to work on either advertising more or getting, keyboard player to learn the material a little bit better. Instead of the one guy being the dictator, hey, you do some of this, help me out with this. I can't, once the one guy is talking too much, it goes in one ear and out the other, you need, but you don't want to ride somebody either. Delegating. Compliments. Compliment your bandmates. Compliment your bandmates when they do something good. Don't just ride their asses every time they screw up. When they do something good, take a great solo, make a great part on the bass, play a great fill, say something, Everybody wants compliments. Again, why are we playing music? We love it, but we also do want the validation that we're playing well. And sometimes you need it from your own bandmates, because it can get in your head sometimes that you're not playing well. If you have a high standard for yourself, nothing's good enough. And every once in a while you impress yourself, but a lot of times you feel like you're not that good. You need a guy to say, hey man, that was good. Or that was a great practice. Or constructive criticism. Hey, that was good, but maybe we could do this a little bit better. Practicing what you preach in communication. Again, and that's the most important thing here. Catching a small problem early because you're communicating. They say that being in a band is like being married to 3 or 4 different people. We know in relationships or being married that it's really difficult. And little small things can turn into huge problems. And if you bury those small things, what's going to happen 6 weeks from now? When you look at somebody wrong, they're going to explode on you. Or when they maybe have had one too many, brandies. That little small problem is going to turn into a big problem, and you're going to have, and once you tell somebody to F off, or God forbid, push somebody, you can have a guy out the door and you're looking for a new saxophone player. Communication is the most important thing in life in general. And again, I want to thank Ryan for having me on his show. Subscribe to the channel. There's daily shows here. And take it from Dr. Glasscock. Being in a band can be tough. It can be it's the most fun. When it's right, it's the most fun thing you can do. It's the most fun thing that you can do because you're playing music that you love, and when it's good, it's hard to explain how good it is. It's just, it's magic. So, subscribe. Talk to you later. Peace out.